looking at this stack of heavy reference books on the table here, there's a massive paradox at the heart of this whole topic, and I think most people completely miss it.
Oh, definitely.
We live in this culture that just fetishizes the grind. Rise and grind, sleep when you're dead, that whole mentality.
Wait, if you're not burning out, you're not trying hard enough.
Exactly, but then we open the file on this specific star, and the ancient sages are basically looking at us and saying, no, you've got it backwards. The throne isn't the seat of power.
The hammock is.
The hammock, it's such a radical idea.
It runs completely counter to the modern narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We assume rest is the opposite of work, or, the absence of productivity. But under the light of Purva Phalguni, rest is actually the fuel for the work.
So it's not a bug, it's a feature.
It's the central feature.
Yeah.
The most productive thing you can do is stop moving.
And that brings us to the former reddish one.
Correct. Purva Phalguni.
We touched on this last time. We've moved out of the root system of the previous star, Maga. Now we're dealing with the fruit.
Exactly. If Maga is the roots, deep in the earth, Purva Phalguni is the fruit hanging on the branch.
Yeah.
And the nature of fruit is, well, it's meant to be tasted. It is meant to be enjoyed.
Right.
But, and this is the key insight for anyone listening who feels guilty about taking a break, this star teaches that you can't constantly exhale. You have to inhale.
So the hammock, the bed, these aren't symbols of laziness in the texts.
Not at all. They are symbols of accumulation. You're gathering the force you need for the next massive creative output.
So it's, what, strategic laziness?
I would call it creative rest. It's the pause between the notes that makes the music.
Okay, let's dig into the psychology of the person who embodies this, because the sources paint a really specific, almost cinematic picture. They use terms like the creative hedonist or the showman.
It helps to visualize the astrological mechanics to understand the personality. We are looking at a star that's ruled by Venus. That's Shukra. But it sits entirely within the sign of Leo, Simha.
So purely astrologically speaking, you have the planet of beauty, desire, and pleasure sitting right in the middle of the throne room of the king, the sun.
Precisely. And it creates this fascinating blend. Pure Leo energy can be a bit domineering, to, as I say, look at my power.
Sure, very commanding.
But when you add that Venusian layer, it becomes charm. It becomes softness. They don't command you to follow them. They seduce you into their orbit. It's a solar authority that's been softened by grace.
The sources mention a youthful, carefree exuberance. It's like when this person walks into a room or into this cafe, the lighting seems to change. The temperature goes up a few degrees.
It does. They are the showman. But unlike a typical Leo who might just want attention for attention's sake, the Purva Phalguni native wants to curate an experience. They're type A about their leisure.
Type A about leisure. What does that even look like?
It means they don't just want to sit in a chair. They want the perfect chair with the perfect lighting, the perfect ambient music, and the perfect drink in hand. If one little element is off, they can't relax.
That's such an interesting distinction. It's someone who pursues relaxation with the same intensity the general pursues a war.
That is the perfect way to put it. And speaking of generals, the texts mention that these natives are often victorious over adversaries.
Oh.
But again, not through brute force.
How then?
Because they're ruled by the deity Bha, the god of fortune, they have this innate sense that the universe just likes them. They don't swim upstream, they float downstream and somehow arrive at the destination before the people who are struggling.
Right. It's the person who sleeps in, misses the bus, and then finds a $100 bill on the sidewalk while waiting for the next one.
Exactly. That is the energy of Bha.
But every light casts a shadow. And with a Sun-Venus combination, that shadow has to be pretty blinding. The sources are pretty heavy-handed about the risks here. They talk about vanity, narcissism.
Of course. It's the danger of the mirror. If that solar need for significance curdles, it becomes an obsession with one's own image. But there's a deeper psychological risk mentioned in the text that I find really compelling.
Yeah.
The disturbed mind.
Disturbed in what way? Like unstable?
Boredom. It's the inability to sit with oneself without external input. The primary motivation of this star is Kaa, my desire. They crave sensory input. They need to see beautiful things, taste good food, hear praise.
So if the stimulation stops.
If the applause dies down, they can become profoundly restless. And this is why the sources are so specific about the risk of addiction.
Right, the notes mention that explicitly.
They aren't just drinking for the taste, they're trying to fill a sensory void. If the mind isn't entertained, it starts to eat itself.
This feels like the perfect moment to bring up the case study that was all over the research. You can't really talk about this archetype without talking about Madonna.
She is the textbook example provided in the literature. She has both her ascendant and her moon in Purva Phalguni.
It tracks perfectly. I mean, think about her career. She started as the material girl, which is pure, unfiltered Venusian desire, just wanting stuff.
But look at the trajectory.
Yeah.
She didn't stay there. And this is the key to understanding the potential of this star. She evolves.
She did.
She embodies the showman aspect perfectly, constantly reinventing her image. That's the creative impulse. But she maintained this regal, command of the stage presence. That's the Leo influence.
She's never not in charge.
Never. She disciplined her desire. She took that Venusian energy, the fashion, the sex appeal, the art, and she structured it with solar will. She didn't just enjoy the fruit, she built an empire out of the orchard.
That transition from just enjoying the fruit to building the empire, that leads us to vocation. What are these people actually meant to do with this energy? The notes mention a Sanskrit term, Prajanana Shakti.
Yes, Prajanana Shakti. It translates to the power of creative procreation. Now, biologically, yes, this can relate to children and fertility.
Right.
But professionally, it's the power to launch things, to give birth to ideas, to trends, to artistic movements.
So the hammock we talked about, that's just the incubator.
Exactly. The rest is the gestation period for the next big launch.
The vocations listed seem pretty obvious at first glance. Actors, musicians, models, photographers, anything dealing with light and image. But then there's this other subset linked to the deity, BHA.
Right. BHA isn't just a god of luck or money. He governs unions, contracts, shares. So these natives often make incredible wedding planners or matchmakers or even marital therapists. They just understand the mechanics of what brings people together.
We get the share.
They get the share. And then there's the one that threw me off a bit.
Government service?
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems contradictory to the whole party vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You picture this person at a Met Gala, not a city council meeting.
Exactly. It feels too bureaucratic.
But think about what a diplomat actually does. They smooth over rough edges. They use charm to achieve political ends.
Okay, I see that.
Because of the Leo influence, Purva Phalguni is comfortable with authority. They like being close to the king, but they have the social grace to deal with the public. A diplomat is often more effective than a general.
And Purva Phalguni is the diplomat.
They get the treaty signed over a really nice dinner.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's pull on that thread of union and relationships, because this seems to be the central stage for this nakshatra. You mentioned BHA is the god of marital bliss.
Yes. In the mythology, the great wedding procession of Lord Shiva and Parvati started under this star. That's a massive cosmic anchor.
Wow.
It suggests that the ultimate fruit of life isn't just personal pleasure, it's shared joy. It's the sanctity of the contract between two people.
Okay, so let me set the scene here. We have this regal, romantic solar star, we have Shiva's wedding, we have Madonna, and then I look at the animal symbol in the notes, and it's a rat.
It does stop you in your tracks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You expect a lioness
Yeah.
or a peacock, maybe a swan.
Yeah, anything but a rat. How do you reconcile the lion sign with the rat animal? Is it just a mistake in the texts?
No, it's highly intentional. You have to look at the mythology of the rat and the Vedic tradition. The rat is the vahana, or the vehicle of Lord Ganesha,
The elephant god.
the remover of obstacles.
Yeah.
And Ganesha is large, heavy, imposing. The rat is capable of carrying that immense burden.
So it implies a hidden strength.
It employs tenacity
Mm-hmm.
and resourcefulness. Think about a rat. It can get into spaces a lion cannot. It survives anywhere. In relationships, this suggests that beneath the glamorous showman exterior, the Purva Phalguni native is incredibly domestic and tenacious.
Oh, interesting.
They're willing to carry the heavy emotional burdens of a relationship. They want the nest. They want the pantry full.
So on stage they are the lion, at home they are the rat.
Exactly. They are domestic creatures at heart.
That connects to the compatibility dynamics in the notes. The ideal match is the male rat, which is the previous star, Maga.
The ancestor star and the fruit star, a natural pair. They understand each other's need for both power and comfort. They both want the throne, but they also both want to raid the fridge at 2 a.m.
But then we have the enemy, the cat.
Ashlesha and Punarvasu. The cat archetypes. The dynamic is primal. It's predator and prey.
So if you're a rat, you can't relax if there's a cat in the room.
You can't. And remember, the core need of Purva Phalguni is that hammock, the ability to let one's guard down. You cannot rejuvenate. You can't have that creative rest if you are constantly looking over your shoulder.
A relationship with a cat native would just keep their nervous system fried.
Completely. It prevents the very thing the rat needs to survive. Peace.
It's interesting how the shadow manifests in love, too. Because of that Venus influence, the source is warned about a wandering eye.
That is the challenge of Kima, the thrill of the chase, the initial spark. That is very Purva Phalguni. But BHA demands the stability of the union.
So the real work is getting past the honeymoon phase.
The spiritual challenge for this native is moving from the excitement of the former reddish one, the blush of first love, to the sustained commitment of the long term. If they stay stuck in that craving for new sensory input, they just become a serial dater.
Addicted to the honeymoon, incapable of the marriage.
You got it.
Which brings us to the physical vessel. We're talking about a star that loves pleasure, loves food, the good life. That has to have a cost for the body.
It does. The medical astrology here is very specific. We're looking at the heart, which is ruled by Leo, and the reproductive system ruled by Venus.
And the notes mention the lips specifically.
Yes, the lips are cited as a ruled body part.
Mm-hmm.
You often see skin problems manifesting around the mouth for these natives. It's very Venusian placement. The mouth is the gateway to taste, to speech, to kissing. It's a primary sensory organ.
And the heart issues. That connects right back to our opening paradox, doesn't it?
It does. The hammock isn't just a lifestyle choice. It is a medical prescription.
A prescription.
This is a pitta, or fiery constitution. They run hot. Their ambition runs hot. If a poor fool Juni native does not rest, if they skip that siesta, their circulation suffers. Their heart suffers. They literally burn through their vitality.
They have to rest to revitalize the physical heart.
They must.
There are also some specific risks mentioned that seem a bit intense. Accidents involving fire.
It aligns with the nature of the star. It's classified as ojura, which means fierce or severe. Fire is their element, but it can turn on them if they're careless. It's not a gentle warmth, it's a bonfire.
And, of course, the risk of venereal diseases, which goes back to the shadow side of K.
The need for discipline.
It's easy to dismiss this star as superficial. I mean, we've talked about hammocks, sex, fame, and makeup, but the sources point to something much deeper philosophically.
You have to return to the deity, BHA. The philosopher Sri Aurobindo described BHA not just as the enjoyer, but as the enjoyer of the power of truth.
The enjoyer of the power of truth, that elevates the conversation significantly.
It changes everything. It means that KAM desire is not something to be rejected.
Yeah.
We aren't talking about monk-like asceticism here. We are talking about the spiritualization of desire.
So true pleasure comes when your creative output aligns with truth.
Exactly. When Madonna creates, at her best, she isn't just making a pop song. She's expressing a truth about the human condition. That is when the fruit is sweet. It rejuvenates you rather than draining you.
Whereas if you just pursue pleasure to escape reality,
It drains you. But if you pursue pleasure to celebrate the truth of existence, it feeds you.
So the lesson isn't to stop enjoying life, it's to enjoy the right things, to find the sacred in the sensory.
Precisely. To eat the fruit with gratitude.
There's one final paradox I want to unpack before we close this file. We keep talking about hammocks and rest, but you mentioned the classification as ojura fierce. How can a hammock be fierce?
Think of a lioness on the savannah. She spends 20 hours a day sleeping, lounging, licking her paws. She looks entirely relaxed.
Total leisure.
But that relaxation is a gathering of potential energy. When she moves, the violence is sudden, absolute, and effective. Purva Phalguni is fierce because it is uncompromising in its pursuit of what it wants.
It's not a passive rest, it's an active charging of the battery.
And that fierceness is required to burn away the vanity we discussed. It takes a fierce will to say, I will not be addicted to the applause, I will be addicted to the truth. That is the warrior spirit hidden inside the hedonist.
That is a powerful image to hold. The creative hedonist, who is actually a spiritual warrior in disguise, fighting the battle against their own vanity to find the truth in pleasure.
And doing it all from the comfort of a very well-upholstered chair.
Of course. It has to be comfortable. Well, looking down at the table, I see our coffee cups are empty. The party of Purva Phalguni is winding down.
And rightfully so. We have tasted the fruit, we've enjoyed the harvest, but the procession moves on. We leave the former reddish one, that initial spark of romance and creativity, and we must move toward the latter reddish one.
We move from the honeymoon phase of Purva to the marriage contract of Uttara.
From the fun to the commitment.
But that is a story for the next cup of coffee. Until then, ask yourself, are you resting to escape your life, or are you resting to charge your power?
Until then.